What's up, Much Music? Sade here, and since we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, here's a list of the highest first-week sales since its inception in 1973. I'd like to first point out that from 1973 to 1989, hip-hop was still in its infancy and rarely made it to mainstream media. Numbers from first-week sales also weren't as big a thing as they are now, so let's kick it off with some notable projects from each year. From 1973 to 1979, hip-hop was still an underground movement in the Bronx of New York. One of the first hip-hop songs recorded was Rapper's Delight by Sugar Hill Gang. In 1980, Kurtis Blow releases his self-titled album. The album includes songs like The Breaks and Christmas Rappin'. Kurtis Blow is considered one of the pioneers of hip-hop. In 1981, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five gained popularity. Grandmaster Flash would go on to create the groundbreaking single, The Adventures of Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel. This was a key moment in hip-hop as it helped the development of sampling, mega mixes, and mashups. Their impact and commercial appeal continued into 1982 with their album, The Message. In 1983, the soundtrack to the movie Wild Style is released. It's considered by many as the first hip-hop movie and immortalizes the birth of underground hip-hop in New York. In 1984, Run DMC releases their self-titled album. The album mixed both rock and hip-hop elements and went certified gold by the end of that year. This would be the first rap album to do so, making Run DMC one of the most influential rap groups of all time. In 1985, LL Cool J released Radio. This quickly gained commercial success and critical acclaim. Hopping over to 1987, his second studio album, Bigger and Deffer, goes platinum. The album featured widely popular song, I Need Love. Now let's turn back time to 1986 when Run DMC releases Raising Hell. The album featured major track Walk This Way in collaboration with Aerosmith and My Adidas. Beastie Boys' License to Ill also did extraordinarily well that year. In 1988, NWA releases Straight Outta Compton. This album propelled gangster rap into the mainstream, bringing attention to police brutality and street life. Now, one of the most notable albums in 1989 was 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. Featured tracks like Me, Myself, and I Know. This album is said to have introduced skits to hip-hop. 1990 is when things get really crazy with MC Hammer. He releases his album, Please Hammer, Don't Hurt Him. This features the iconic song, You Can't Touch This. MC Hammer then became one of the first rappers to go certified diamond. In 1991, Vanilla Ice releases To The Extremes and became one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. In 1992, Dr. Dre releases his debut solo project, The Chronic. The album features songs like Nothing But a G-Thing and Let Me Ride. Okay, around now, we can kind of get into the numbers. In 1993, Snoop Dogg releases Doggy Style. The album features songs like Gin and Juice and was produced by Dr. Dre himself. The album sold 806,000 in its first week. In 1994, Death Row Records releases Murder Was the Case, with 329,000 sales in its first week. The album features singles like You Better Recognize and Natural Born Killers. In 1995, Bone Thugs and Harmony released E1999 Eternal. With songs like First of the Month, the album will sell 307,000 copies in its first week. In 1996, Tupac releases posthumous album The Don Illuminati, The 7 Day Theory, and sold 664,000 records that first week. In 1997, Notorious B.I.G. releases his second and final album, Life After Death. The album dropped just weeks after his death in March of that year. The album sold 690,000 in its first week sales. In 1998, Beastie Boys released Hello Nasty. With songs like Body Movin' and Intergalactic, the album sold 681,000 in its first week. In 1999, DMX releases And Then There Was X. The album did 698,000 in its first week sales. In the year 2000, beginning of the millennia, Eminem releases Marshall Mathers LP. This would go on to be the second highest selling hip-hop album of all time, second only to another one of Eminem's albums. The album sold 1,760,000 in its first week. In 2001, DMX's The Great Depression will do 440,000 in its first week. The album features songs like We Right Here and I Miss You. In 2002, Eminem releases his fourth studio album, The Eminem Show. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the best-selling hip-hop album of all time, selling over 27 million copies worldwide. The album did 1.3 million in its second week. In 2022, the album went 12 times platinum, according to the RIAA. In 2003, 50 Cent's debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, does 872,000 in its first week. The album features wildly successful song In the Club. The album would go 6 times platinum by the end of that year. In 2004, Eminem drops Encore. With songs like Just Lose It and Mockingbird, the album does 871,000 in its first week. In 2005, 50 Cent's follow-up album, The Massacre, would do over 1.1 million in sales in its first week. In 2006, Jay-Z releases his comeback album, Kingdom Come. This marks Jay-Z's comeback to music after his brief retirement. The album sold 680,000 in its first week. In 2007, Kanye West's Graduation goes to #1 on the Billboard chart. This would be his third studio album with songs like Good Life and Stronger. The album sold 957,000 in its first week. In 2008, Lil Wayne's The Carter 3 does over 1 million in sales in its first week, with songs like A Milli and Lollipop. Now guess who's 2 times in a row from 2009 to 2010? You got it, it was Eminem. In 2009, Eminem's 7th studio album, Relapse, with songs Crack a Bottle and We Made You, did 608,000 in its first week. In 2010, he follows up with Recovery, with songs like Not Afraid, Love the Way You Lie featuring Rihanna, and No Love with Lil Wayne. The album does 741,000 in its first week. In 2011, Lil Wayne releases The Carter 4 in August. The album features songs like 6 Foot, 7 Foot, and How to Love. The Carter 4 does 964 units in its first week. In 2012, Nicki Minaj releases Pink Friday, Roman Reloaded. This would make her the only female hip-hop artist on this list. With songs like Bees in the Trap and Starships, the album did 253,000 in its first week. In 2013, Eminem releases Marshall Mathers LP 2. The album features lead single Rap God and does 792,000 in its first week. In 2014, J. Cole releases his 3rd studio album, Forest Hill Drive, with lead single No Role Models. The album would do over 354,000 in its first week. In 2015, Drake releases If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Now this was a mixtape and a surprise drop, but despite that, the project did 535,000 in its first week. In 2016, Drake releases Views. The album features #1 track One Dance and sold over 852,000 in its first week. In 2017, Kendrick Lamar releases his 4th studio album, Damn, with tracks like Humble and DNA. The album sells 603 units in its first week. Damn ended up winning Kendrick Lamar a Pulitzer Prize. It was the first time the award had gone to a musical work outside of the genres of classical music and jazz, and helped further legitimize hip-hop in America. In 2018, Drake drops his 5th studio album, Scorpion. The album includes mega hit God's Plan and Nice for What, and it sells over 732,000 in its first week. In 2019, Post Malone releases his 3rd studio album, Hollywood is Bleeding. The album features tracks like Circles and Sunflower with Sway Lee and sells over 489,000 in its first week. In 2020, Juice WRLD releases posthumous album, Legends Never Die. The album sold 497,000 in its first week. The project includes songs like Smile with The Weeknd and Life's a Mess with Halsey. The album dropped the year following Juice WRLD's death. In 2021, Drake releases Certified Lover Boy. The album sells 613,000 in its first week. The album features tracks like Way Too Sexy and No Friends in the Industry. In 2022, Drake and 21 Savage collab on Her Loss. The album sells 404,000 in its first week. The album features major tracks like Rich Flex and Jumbotron Shit Poppin'. And now there you guys have it. That's 50 years of hip hop. We're in 2023. We're just halfway through. What do you think is going to be the highest selling record of 2023? Come back to this video at the end of the year. Let us know if you guessed right. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let us know which of these albums you think is the greatest hip hop album of all time. Or if the album's not even on the list, let us know which one it is.